Okay, hi. Friday night, kind of late actually. I want to try and share my screen to walk through a bit of Pretty Woman. It's going to be a shorter lecture tonight. I'll be here again on Monday night, and I will post about a 25-page document that has some scene analyses from Pretty Woman. So you'll have plenty to look at, and but let's see what I can do with this tape. The main thing I want to do is see if I can share the showing of Pretty Woman. So let's see, Chrome tab, Pretty Woman, share. Okay, sharing this tab. So according to this, I'm sharing now. I don't know if this means you're going to see it, but I'm just going to try, and we'll walk through
That's the way you always make me feel. Maybe I should.
So let's go to the start here.
Yeah, call me. When? Just call me.
Okay. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, so I'll sort of narrate. So we start with a blank screen and touchstone films, etc., but we can already hear voices, and it's a party. You can hear a piano. It's hard to tell, everyone's talking at once. And the first line that will come out clearly will be somebody saying, no matter what they say, it's always about the money. And then as the image comes up, we see this is a magician, and it's a I would call it a close-up, not of his face, but of his hands. And he's making coins appear and disappear. So let's take a look at that.
No matter what they say, it's all about money. So let's imagine, ladies, that you're a savings and loan officer. Watch. 1, 2, 3. See, you've got it all, and we've got nothing. And you have all four. Take a look. But I wouldn't trust you with real gold. That's why this one's only worth about a penny. And if you wonder where.
So we open with the money transforming itself with the magician, and this kind of sets up the era of Pretty Woman, 1991, 92. This is really the beginning of hedge funds. It's kind of eerie that the GameStop phenomenon has just occurred in the last few days, where some sort of renegade, everyday, living in the cellar stock investors, so to speak, have taken advantage of an app called Robinhood that allows you to trade for free. And so somehow the group, which is millions of people, have teamed up, and they were looking for stocks that the big investors were shorting. Now, shorting means you look at a company that seems like it's likely to go down in stock. So the one they picked was called GameStop, which is a chain of stores in malls that sells video games, and it's certainly done well in the past. But even before COVID, it was starting to flag, because all brick and mortar stores are flagging, and now they're really flagging with COVID. Plus, the technology had gotten to the point where most games, you can buy them and then download them directly to your computer, so you don't need the hardware. There's still a bit of a nostalgia factor, apparently, and a lot of this is coming from my kids. I don't go to the store myself, but so it wasn't like they were out of business, but it looked like they had nowhere to go but down. So this is what big investors look for, and then what they do is they borrow the stock, which they have to pay back, and they then sell the stock for its current value. So let's say they borrow 1,000 shares that are $10 each. Then they wait for the stock to go down, because they only have to pay back whatever the stock is on a given day. So when it drops to 7, they pay for the shares, but they pay $7. So they make $3 a share. So this is called shorting. And when it's a gamble, it's a speculation, and when it works, you make money, but when it doesn't work, you lose money. So if you do this and you'd have $10 and this stock goes up to $13, you're now going to have to you're going to lose $3. You have to pay back the 10, and an additional 3. So the scary part of shorting a stock is that there's actually no limit to your losses. You have to pay it back no matter how high it goes. So this group of Redditors, as they're being called, and they have a site on Reddit and Wall Street Buys or WSB. They were buying en masse. So they basically said everybody buy GameStop. And really their initial sense was less as investors and less as wanting to make money and more on wanting to hack Wall Street. Because by bidding up the stock of GameStop without any regard for what the actual value of the company was, they actually closed out a $13 billion hedge fund. They wrecked it. I think I forgot the name of the hedge fund. I think it's called Melvin, and they had to borrow. They borrowed 2.75 billion from somewhere else. And the idea is if you buy these stocks, GameStop, drive up the price, and then don't sell, you're basically making the shorters take a bath. Anyway, there's lots to read about this on maybe even just CNN or Wall Street Journal. If you dig much deeper than that, it can get bewildering fast. But I've been talking about money and the Hollywood romance since the beginning, since It Happened One Night. And the difference between It Happened One Night and Pretty Woman is, on the one hand, there's no difference. There's a huge amount of money implied. Ellie's father and Edward, Richard Gere's character, are both investors. Now, Ellie's father is investing in 1934, so this is so short, not long after the crash. And Richard Gere is investment banker in 92 when hedge funds were first being invented, this concept of shorting and making money off of companies that fail. And we'll see Edward driving a deal to buy Mr. Morse's property so he can break them back down, sell them out as real estate. Pretty much everyone there will be unemployed. And the leitmotif of this movie, which Vivian notices right away, Julia Roberts' character, is you make a lot of money, but you don't make anything. And that's important. Because as a prostitute, Julia Roberts also makes money, but doesn't make relationships. She doesn't make anything. So as Edward will note later, you and I are similar creatures. We both screw people for money. And so this is what Edward and Vivian would appear to have in common. They're both selling something that is immaterial. Edward is moving money around. Vivian is renting her body, put it that way. And it's transactional. It's purely transactional. And after the evening or the hour is over, she leaves, and there's no trace. There's not even the potential of a relationship or the beginning of a relationship or even a failed relationship. There never was a relationship. It was a transaction. So Pretty Woman is wrestling once again with how can we have true love if everything is transaction? And in a hyper saturated stock environment, everything is for sale, and also no value is inherent. So because in true love, your true love becomes priceless, which is to say off the market. And it doesn't matter if somebody could somehow objectively prove that there's a prettier woman or a sexier woman or a smarter woman. When you're in love, that's not the point. You're not trading. And that's also the power of true love, because it stops the endless erosion of an anonymity and substitutability. Obviously, what Edward does is he breaks down companies the same way. It doesn't matter what the company is. So he takes these very different companies that are run by family. We meet Morse, we meet his son, that employ lots of people, and he does the exact same thing to every one of them. It doesn't matter what the company is or where it comes from. Vivian does something similar. It doesn't matter where her clients are from. It doesn't matter if they're married, if they're single. It's transactional, and part of the transaction is don't ask, don't tell. I mean, she can ask or they can tell, but the whole point of the money means that no relationship needs to take place. So it's not bartering, it's not even trading. The money permits no relationship to take place. So that when Edward buys the shipping industry yards of Morse, he's not going to have at least his initial idea, he's not going to have a relationship with that company or with Morse's grandson, who's up and coming and so on, or with the ships they used to build or anything else about it doesn't matter the history of this, of the boat building, the families, it's all the same to Edward no matter what the company is. In the same way that Vivian's all clients are the same. And she makes that point that I'm just like a robot. I just get in, I do it. I don't kiss on the mouth. Edward says, neither do I. So they establish that they're purely transactional people. Both Edward and Vivian have a backstory where they once cared about relationship. Edward's father had a lot of money, left the family, left the mother with no money. We're not given details, but Edward suffered, and he suffered watching his mother suffer. So he hates his father. He's angry at his father, and the one way that he dealt with that is he became a corporate raider. And as he tells Vivian, the third company that I bought, was my dad's, and that was revenge of a sort. The son bought out the father, broke down his company. We don't know much else about the father. We know that Morse gives a really backhanded compliment, saying he wasn't quite the bastard everybody says he was. But Edward hadn't seen him in 14 years. He didn't go to his funeral. There's no more connection between Edward and his father than there is between Vivian and her clients. And Vivian, for her part, her broken relationship is with her mother. And in a way, the same thing happened to both of them, that the trauma in childhood of the father who left and of the mother who constantly degraded Vivian, it sort of broke their natural confidence, their natural innocence. And both of them had to layer up and in a sense, get street smart in rather different ways. And figure out how to become both independent and invulnerable. So the Pretty Woman as a Hollywood genre has a lot of work to do, because you have two people who were broken and traumatized, recovered by becoming, in their own minds especially, independent and invulnerable. So when Vivian talks with her friend Kiki, I forget the name of her friend right now, and they're very clear about we say who, we say when, we say how much, and they, although Kiki is wavering, and should we take a pimp, and that should we allow ourselves to be bought out by somebody else who then would supply us with clients, but we'd have to give that person the money, sort of like working in a restaurant as a waitress. You get your hourly wage, you don't get how much the restaurant takes in selling the food. So in a way, Vivian and her friend are still trying to cook and sell their own food without a middle person who supposedly supplies the overhead, the protection, probably the drugs, because the relationship with a pimp is extremely exploitive. As a rule, they pocket most of the money. They may well supply drugs because that makes you a more pliable client, employer for them to exploit. So Vivian's certainly right to be wary of that. But the point is that they're the least two likely people you can meet for having a relationship. And somehow the Hollywood romance is going to have to break that down. We know that in order for that to even happen, they'll have to be brought back to a site of vulnerability that they left behind long ago with no intention of ever returning to it. So we can see in The Graduate, and it happened one night as well, how much, to take Benjamin for instance, it's curious because Benjamin is in his vulnerable moment. Like, he's been layered up with accomplishments, but now he's graduated, he doesn't have class, he doesn't have a GPA, he's not excited about the next step or grad school. In fact, he's on a conveyor belt being moved through life by his parents, well, by their ambitions for him, but really their ambitions for him are attempts to assuage their own chronic disappointments. He's supposed to somehow do something that they haven't. And Elaine's parents are in somewhat different ways, but have a similar attitude that their children will redeem their lives, which means their children, to the degree that they acquiesce to this, don't have lives. It's one thing to be cared for and have someone overlook things for you when you're a child, but if you don't intend to let that go, and I think one reason Mrs. Robinson wants to push Elaine into a marriage that will be as loveless and depressing as her own is it will keep Elaine as her thing, and to a lesser extent, that I think that's the drive of Benjamin's parents as well. So the opening of Pretty Woman is simply front-loading what It Happened One Night keeps in the background. I mean, the establishing shot of It Happened One Night is a yacht, an expensive yacht. So we immediately know there's money. We see how Ellie's dressed. We see how her father is treated. We see her dive off the yacht. And then we see the hunt for her, which is underwritten by massive amounts of money. But the father loves her, and to a fault. And so the money is kept safely on the margins of the movie, and It Happened One Night. It only shows up at key moments, like the scene where the father is on the phone with King Wesley late in the movie saying, "Yep, you got that annulled. That's the smartest thing you ever did. I've mailed you a check for $100,000. Oh, I'm not complaining. Best money I ever spent. Good riddance," and so on. And so the father steps in with a ton of cash. And whereas at the end of The Graduate, because in some ways the endings are similar. You have a bride who breaks away from the altar and runs away with her true love. But in It Happened One Night, the bride who's breaking away has a loving and relationship with a very wealthy father. And presumably if they're okay with the dad paying $100K to annul the marriage, then other aid that they may need will be coming. That doesn't mean, I mean, clearly Clark Gable's independent. He wants to be a journalist. He's not a gold digger, but the money's there. The safety net is there. With Vivian, of course, it isn't. She ran away from home. Her mother said she was a bum magnet. She had 2 bums as a boyfriend. Then she said she followed bum number 3 to New York, and then she tried other jobs for minimum wage. And then she met Kit. I think her name is Kit. And Kit sort of showed her the ropes, and do you want to be a roommate? And she is making $100 an hour instead of probably what I think he made maybe $4 to $5, maybe $4 an hour in a kind of McJob back in 91, 92. So it was a monetary decision. And I think for Vivian, she may have also concluded that, well, if she's a bum magnet, then she's going to attract men, and they'll have a sexual relationship with her for free and leave her with even less than when she met them. So to a certain extent, she's like, well, I can't seem to have relationships that are mutually reciprocal or emotionally supportive or that permit me to repair trauma. So I might as well get paid. I think she, with some justification, is like, I've been paying and paying to be in bad relationships. So why don't I just stop worrying about it being a relationship at all and simply get paid up front? What that leaves out, of course, is, and what she's kind of signed off on, is that she's not going to ever have a love relationship. And although she never specifically says this, and with Edward it seems even less obvious, but I think both of them fear, on a level they don't think about every day, that they're unlovable. And the proof seems to be there because, as Edward says at one point, my ex-wife is living in my ex-house with my ex-dog, and my ex-girlfriend we just broke up. And later he'll say, impossible relationships are my special gift. She says they were all bum magnets. So in a way, neither one of them seems to have ever had a relationship that moved away from negotiation through vulnerability to intimacy. And it's probably not entirely the fault of their partners. I mean, they themselves cannot tolerate feeling vulnerable. And if you can't tolerate feeling vulnerable, you're not going to be able to tolerate it long enough to come out the other side with a sense of trust for the other person, where you both were vulnerable together. Neither one of you hurt each other. Both of you supported each other. You come out the other side with intimacy and with trust. And I haven't talked as much about trust, but intimacy, if you move from negotiation to vulnerability to intimacy, you can't sustain it unless it also begins to elicit trust, which is a separate emotion. Because it's one thing to both feel vulnerable and to both feel intimate, but if you're going to feel that way going forward, you're going to have to trust that the other person is in a good faith position with you, that they will continue to honor your vulnerability and you will continue to honor theirs. Otherwise, it could have been quite intimate. You could talk all night and it's still a one-night stand if the trust isn't there. If you find out the next morning that they're already married, let's say, and they say, yeah, I know, but I like you, and so it's not going to work because the trust is gone, and now you did move through the vulnerability, but you feel like you've been thrown back into the vulnerability. The way this movie opens, the 2 minute, not even 2 minutes, he breaks up with the ex-girlfriend in less than a minute on the phone. And the woman is clearly very transactional too. And what she's essentially saying, and I'll play the actual conversation in a moment and hope that you can hear it because I don't totally trust this screen sharing. But he calls her and says, "Where are you?" And she says, "I'm in New York." He says, I told my secretary to make all the arrangements. And she goes, "Yeah, I know. I talk to your secretary all the time. I'm not at your beck and call." And he says, I don't think you're at my beck and call. But of course he does. There's no question. He pays for her apartment. They in a way, they have a high, at least to this point, they have a high-end client relationship. I mean, she's called his girlfriend, but he pays for all her upkeep, and she's supposed to show up when he says so. It's not mutually reciprocal at all. And I think, I'm totally guessing, because we don't get enough information, that was okay with this woman that he's on the phone with, because she gave it, at least in her own mind, a certain amount of time for the investment to reach maturity. I mean, that's how many times have we heard people talking about making an investment in a relationship? And one gets the feeling that the woman was fine being at his beck and call for the short term, sort of shorting the relationship, but she assumed it would evolve into something else. And it's clearly static. And he does this because he talks to the other woman, the secretary, after he breaks up with the girlfriend, and says, did you talk more to the secretary than you did to me? Did you talk more to my girlfriend than you do to me? And she says, she was like my maid of honor at my wedding. So the two women became best friends, trying to keep up with Edward. He was clueless. And now this secretary at the party has gotten married and said, I couldn't wait for you. And so he's kind of oblivious. He goes in and he makes these deals with the women. And I guess to his credit, he's clear that this is a deal. And, you get a car and you get an apartment and you get a credit card that works. And I get a no nonsense, no messy feelings girlfriend, quote unquote. Because what he really decides when he hires Vivian for the week is that what he really wants he wants a hired girlfriend. And in the business of prostitution in the last few years, there is this new phenomenon called the girlfriend experience. So there's the porn star experience and there's the girlfriend experience, which you can see offered on various websites. The girlfriend experience, interestingly, in the last 5 to 10 years, and I don't know this from personal experience, it's just me being a cultural historian, but the girlfriend experience is getting more and more popular because the men who are hiring women for the night, hiring women by the hour, certainly there's an interest in sex, but kind of more interesting is that they also want a girlfriend experience, which makes the woman sound like a ride at Disney World. But things that men are looking for emotionally uncomplicated support, things like hugging, things that aren't typically associated with a prostitute. And certainly in the 80s, it was much more the porn star idea, that you hired a woman so that she could be hypersexual and be whatever you wanted. I mean, Vivian plays with this idea for a moment when Edwards picked her up after he's lost in the boulevard and gets hustled by her for $20 really to give her directions and to give him directions. And at one point he says, "So what's your name?" And she moves into kind of professional mode and says, "What would you like it to be?" And he just gives her this look like, I'm not, don't hustle me when that's not what this is. This was, the transaction here was $20 for directions. And then she sees his look and she goes, "Vivian." And so she drops out of the, sort of a kind of porn star experience offering to Edward, like, "I'll be whatever, you can call me whatever you want." And you can, as she says later, "What do you want me to do?" And he says, "And what do you do?" And she says, "Everything, but I don't kiss on the mouth." So this is sort of the porn star experience. So what's ironic is that she senses, Vivian senses it in a way. What he wants is the girlfriend experience, and she doesn't even know about really the breakup. But and that's true. He wants to hire a girlfriend. He doesn't necessarily want a prostitute, and he doesn't want a hypersexual performance such as you might get from some kind of porn star performance or strip club, as we saw in The Graduate. He's actually lonely, but he's so afraid of vulnerability that he can't even approach his loneliness unless he can make sure that everything's already bought and paid for. And he's very clear about that. And when they have their first big argument after he thoughtlessly told Stuckey, "Don't worry, she's not an industrial spy, she's a hooker," and Stuckey immediately took advantage of that and leveraged that and went over and began to just say, "So you're a hooker, this is kind of cool, and maybe I'll come over." And she says at one point, she goes, "Sure, why not?" But you can see by her face that she's really kind of crushed. And then we have a counter shot where Edward has no idea what's just gone down, is nodding and smiling, and she's kind of just not really reacting much, and doesn't talk all the way home. And she's like, "How are you?" And she says, "Fine." "Can we have some word other than fine?" And she's, "Well, how about asshole?" And he's like, "Well, I think I like fine better." And then it comes out that, and he's confused again. Like, "I hate to state the obvious, but you are a hooker." And she's like, "Yeah, but when I'm being a hooker, quote unquote, I'm in my outfit, I'm armored, I'm robotic, I'm not kissing on the mouth. This is 100% transactional. I was in a nice dress at this polo match enjoying the day, and this person came up and just started addressing me as a street hooker." And he doesn't get it at first, and then she's like, "I'm leaving." And those of you who read Good Morning Midnight with me, it's remarkably similar that where Edward almost plays the role of Sasha from the novel, that she's leaving and the money is on the bed, and she leaves and goes to wait for the elevator, and she's punching the buttons, and he glances in the bedroom and sees that the money is still on the bed. And I think it's important, and that's a turning point in the movie. On the one hand, you could criticize Edward, like, what if the money was gone? Would he have gone after her? And if not, what does it mean that he went after her after he saw she'd left the money behind? The money has a very peculiar role, because in the end, he's going to give her the money when she finally does leave, after turning down his offer to set her up the way his previous girlfriend had been set up, with an apartment, a car, a credit card. And she says, "That would have been a great deal. I would have taken that. But my love for you and what felt more or less like your love for me has given me a level of confidence where my self-worth has gone up." And so ironically, he can't offer her a nice enough deal, because his love for her and her for him, that it's elevated both of their confidences. They're both interested in tolerating vulnerability, because it never occurred to them that they could enjoy intimacy, like emotional and physical intimacy, with anyone. And then they did. Now, and he's still scared. He's scared of heights. He's scared of commitment. And they're about virtually the same thing in this movie. And he says, I've heard what you said. I've heard that you've turned me down. This is all I'm capable of right now. And interestingly, she says, I know. And there's no scene. There's no like, how dare you? And she's sad, but all of a sudden she's grounded. Like he says at one point, stay one more night, not because I paid you, but because you want to. Obviously, she's wanted to for a couple of nights. And she says, no. And she also says there's always going to be a Stucky. And we got to remember that because the end of the movie is so well orchestrated, coming down the street in the limousine, holding the roses aloft, climbing it had to be at the top. He says he's climbing up the fire escape. And he says, what happens when the prince rescues the princess? And she says, she rescues him right back, which is one of the best expressions of mutual reciprocity that I've seen in a romance. I mean, the most explicit. But they never answered the question about Stucky. This is what I call reinscription in these genre films. They seem to solve the problem that a streetwalker who'd been emotionally damaged and an investment banker who'd been emotionally damaged, they can fall in love, and the love will recalibrate everything. So it won't matter that she was a street hooker. It won't matter that whatever his and how many people he threw out of jobs with Stucky for 10 years. I mean, there's no telling how many jobs and families Edward disrupted with his corporate takeovers. So they both have this sort of past that's littered with kind of dead bodies, speaking metaphorically. And then the romance somehow seems to clean everything up, but we have to notice that it misses a beat. Because she's right, Stucky is still out there, and now he's been fired, and he has no reason not to tell everybody he sees what her past is. So we get swept up, and in the idea that for that they've now transcended the marketplace, but they haven't. I mean, there's still that past, and weirdly enough, Edward doesn't have leverage over Stucky now because he threw him out. I mean, Stucky would have to behave himself, but he doesn't seem capable of it. So I'm glad he threw him out. But the point is, he's a loose agent out there, and Vivian is incredibly vulnerable. It's not her money. She has the past that will be stigmatized. He doesn't. Corporate raiders, their past in general is not stigmatized because they're well within the capitalist regime, and selling out companies and throwing people out of business and creating hardship for families. That's all somehow covered over. But selling your body, perhaps to married men, which of course might also cause any number of problems and heartaches. But one is sort of seen as kind of despicable, and the other is seen as it's admired. I mean, there's that scene on Rodeo Drive where he takes her shopping, and she's like, everybody's looking at me. And he goes, they're not looking at you. They're looking at me. Not because he's being a sex symbol, but because he looks like a powerful, rich man. And watching the glances in this movie is really interesting. You can almost do a kind of montage, like when Vivian's walking through the hotel lobby dressed in her, her hooker apparatus. All the gazes, she gets two kinds of gazes: very disapproving women, sort of interested men who have no intention of engaging, including that man by the elevator where his wife says, close your mouth, dear. And so there's that gawking, and then Kit also later says, $50, 75, your wife can watch. And there's that very, I mean, it's really crude, but it's in some ways it's acceptable to us as viewers because we feel the hypocrisy somehow of the people in the hotel, as we do the two snobby retailers who won't wait on Vivian when she's dressed as the hooker and don't even recognize her when she has outfitted herself, and she's able to say, you work on commission, right? And we're back to money. And it's a big mistake, huge. I was, all these shopping bags, you could have sold me all of this, but you didn't, and let that be a lesson to you, which is all very well. I didn't like those store ladies much either, but they're really only cowed by Edward's wealth, and the confidence that that Vivian it literally changes the way Vivian walks. It changes the way her posture. It changes, and she suddenly is she controls the gaze of the men. I mean, they're looking at her, but now they're not looking at her with like, can I exploit this, or can I throw this out of the hotel, or like the hotel concierge who wants to get Vivian out of there, but also doesn't want to alienate Edward. And so she goes from a focal point of social rejection to a focal point of social envy. She in a word, she becomes glamorous. And glamorous, if you look at its root words in the OED, is a capacity to invoke jealousy. So it was applied to gods who had glamour. So being glamorous, or the magazine Glamour, part of it is to become an object of envy in the marketplace of female beauty. To be the most beautiful woman in the room is to be the most valuable woman in the room. And this is how stocks work too. Stocks only have value relative to other stocks. They have no intrinsic value. And this is done with women. Women are on a marketplace, whether they want to be or not, whether they choose to be or not. It's already built in that any gathering, any party, any place where there are groups of women, an unspoken rating system, which people may or may not subscribe to, is nonetheless there over which woman attracts the most gazes, which stock attracts the most bids. How does your stock go up and down in a stock market? Well, you're seen as having become more valuable than the other stocks around you. And that's what these renegades from Redditor, they took an ugly stock and they treated it like it was beautiful. And weirdly enough, it became a beautiful stock because it was treated as like it was beautiful, which also means it was never ugly. So this idea of ugly and beautiful is also generated by this relativism of ugly and beautiful compared to what. So women, Luce Irigaray wrote a very good article called Women on the Marketplace, which made this point that women are like stocks in the sense that their perceived value by other bidders, by men who look at them, determines their worth, but has nothing to do with their actual value. And this is why we never know in the stock market whether stocks are undervalued, overvalued, because you can trick people into thinking it has a greater worth relative to other stocks. I mean, you hear this in the love songs too, like you want to be with her because she looks so hot, but I actually love you. She doesn't. You don't see it. She's gonna break your heart. And then depending on the song, it's like, and don't come running to me when she does, or maybe I will take you back after you've learned your lesson, depending on the pop song. I'm going to try and play a little bit more of this, again, in the hopes that you're actually able to hear it. Let's see.
Hello, Mr. Lewis.
How you doing? I want this whole thing wrapped up as soon as possible. I got to get to New York by Sunday. I got tickets to the Met.
Yes, sir. Your coat, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you.
Edward.
Susan.
Hi. I was sorry to hear about Carter.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Heard you got married.
Well, yeah, I couldn't wait for you.
Susan, tell me something.
Yes.
When you and I were dating, did you speak to my secretary more than you spoke to me?
She was one of my bridesmaids.
Huh. Your husband's a very lucky guy. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
You?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
He's leaving. Edward's leaving.
So at this point, we can establish that Edward as well, his value is being determined relative to others. When Stuckey's wife runs up to him to say he's leaving, he is the most valuable item at the party. And if he leaves, it deflates the stock of everybody else who's left. And so Stuckey will try and prevent this, but he's done. He doesn't need anything else from this party. And here's where we cut from that segue of he's leaving the party, but then we see Vivian waking up and getting ready for the night. and she's using a black magic marker to repair her boob. Later we hear that there's Edward notices there's a safety pin in her clothing. So there's right from the beginning, he's also as she does, as she's assessing her stock. Like, and Kit will say the same thing when she sees the lotus. She says, "You take them. You look hot tonight." But we know that it's the upkeep of that she has upkeep. She has overhead. She has to wear these clothes, these boots, for instance, which are starting to wear out. And she can't really afford new boots, but they're part of the accoutrements of her, what she trades in. They're props for what she offers. I mean, what she offers is her body, but she needs advertising and she needs props to situate her body like any commodity, so that it elicits a positive response in a potential client or consumer. And her overhead is tight, as they say in the financial market. In other words, she's barely making rent, and Kit just spent the rent on drugs. And so she's having to sneak down the fire escape to not see the landlord. So she is barely breaking even. So that becomes the discussion at one point where Edward says, what's the going rate for you girls now? And she's like $100 an hour. And for some reason, he's astonished. He seems to think that's like a crazy amount, which is somewhat, it's really kind of nothing compared to how much they're risking and how much what they're actually trading. But he's like, you make $100 an hour and you have like your clothes are being held together by like a bobby pin. And they move on from that to discuss cars, and she knows a lot about them. And that's when we first learn that Vivian is smart. I mean, she's had no opportunities, but what opportunities she's had, she's maximized. And she says it very quickly. I knew a lot of boys in Georgia. They bought cars cheap. They fixed them up, sold them for a profit. I paid attention. And she's still paying attention. And she's a bit trapped right now, but she is a potential entrepreneur. And he can't help noticing that, as well as being kind of amused and surprised at how effectively she hustled him when she said, I'll give you directions for $5. And she goes, you can't hustle me. And she said, sure I can. The price just went up to 10. And he goes, ridiculous. You can't charge me for directions. And awfully naive of him to say that. You can charge people for anything. And she says, I can do whatever I want. I'm not lost. And you see his kind of reluctant appreciation. And he's like, fine, I only have a 20. And you have to watch closely, but she's seen that Carlos the pimp is noticing her and is starting to move in her direction. So when she jumps in and says, for 20, I'll show you personally, she's actually trying to get out of there, to get away from Carlos. So that she has a double agenda. And then he goes lurching down the street and she goes, lights would be nice here. And when they get to the drop off at the Beverly Wilshire, it's interesting that she says, I'll take a taxi back. And he goes back to the office, and they laugh about that. And then she sits on the bus stop bench. And for some reason, he's just about to go in the hotel. And it's interesting that catches his eye. And maybe it's the first time he actually has a feeling in regards to her, this woman named Vivian, and not just commodities and trading. And I'm guessing that in that moment, it recalls vulnerability on his part. Like, he was not born rich. And although we don't get the details of his backstory, there were probably times, it's confusing that he says his first car was a limousine, because he also later says, my father left and he took all the money. So it's hard to see that he never had to take buses or whatever else he might have had to do. But whatever it was, she reminds him of it. And the fact that she doesn't want to spend $20, 10 of the $20 on a taxi, she wants to spend one or two of the dollars, which means she wants to save that 18. I mean, he sees an investor in action, somebody, and that's when he comes back to her. And he doesn't even know why, because I don't think he's looking for a sexual encounter at all. He's just enjoying her company, actually, and says, so 100 a night? And she goes, yeah. And he's like, yeah, okay, fine. And she's excited, and then they go up to the boardroom, and then he doesn't know what to do. I mean, she's like, "Let's go. We've got an hour," and he's like, "Let's go what? I haven't planned this. I don't know why I did this." And then at some point he says, I can see this hourly thing is going to be a problem. So how much for the evening? She's like, "You can't afford it," which is silly. He says, "How much?" He says, 300. He says, "Done." And now let's just relax. So it's funny how much he just wants to, he really just wants to be with her, and to not foreground the sexual encounter, and actually seems to be interested in not having her be anonymous. I mean, the minute he says, "What's your name?" and she says, "What do you want it to be?" and he just gives her a look, and then she says her name, and then says what town she's from in Georgia and what she knows about cars. I mean, they are now sharing, well, mostly her, but he took an interest in her actual life and not in her performative capacities. Now, what I'm going to try and find, if I can, I'm going to jump ahead. And if these scenes don't work in what I'm doing right now, if you're only able to hear my voiceover, then we're going to look at more of these scenes on Monday night. So I'm trying to find the first shopping scene. Right here. Thing.
Last night. And Kit, I'm going to leave some at the front desk for you. I want you to pay. Well, I didn't ask if it would fit. I asked how much it was.
Okay, so now she's in that first store, and if you can see the frame, notice how the mannequin to the left, upper left, it stays in the counter shot, and it gives the different shot. Really, what the fight is whether Vivian is going to be is a mannequin. Is she a dress horse? Is she someone you just put sexy clothes on and then sell yourself the way a mannequin sells clothes, except that she's not a mannequin. There's a body, actual body and person inside these clothes. But there is something creepy about the mannequins, both in this shopping scene and in the other shopping scene, because it reminds me of Good Morning Midnight again, where she talks about the mannequins, but that's just an aside. But there's something chilling about these mannequins, because they do indicate the degree to which women are commodified and they are spectacles, and their value is rated according to the quality, quote unquote, of spectacle as determined by the male gaze. Although one thing that, as Vivian goes through her various fashion transformations, she becomes, in an almost technical sense, less and less sexy, and more, as Edward says, elegant. So what's the difference between sexy and elegant? It seems that elegant is conveying that in private you're sexy, but you're not going to be sexy in public, because you're not a publicly traded commodity. You might be married, you might have a boyfriend, you have a commitment, you have someone who cares about you. So as you watch her wardrobe changes, obviously on a literal level, there's less and less skin, and there's less and less shape fitting, although she still continues to be sexy in the hotel room. So, but the gap between how her look, trying to look sexy on a public street to get in the cars of strangers, recedes pretty quickly, and the elegance comes up. And there was a famous country song back in the day called "Behind Closed Doors," where the man sings how exciting it is to see his wife at a party because she's elegant, she's gorgeous, but he knows that he's also his lover, and when they get home and behind the closed doors, then he will get the sexual attention that everyone at this party can only imagine. And that's a big difference, that with wealth, you increasingly have this capacity to pose as the symbolic. As a prostitute, she's almost purely imaginary. What's your name? What do you want it to be? She has no status apart from, she's willing to not have a name in order to make sure that she's purely an extension of the client's desires for the duration of the encounter and for the hourly wage that's being charged. So even here, she said, I didn't ask, whether it fit me. I asked how much it costs. So notice that in this moment, she is briefly in a dominant position, except that they don't believe she has money because she doesn't look like she has money, not the kind of money they assume she would need for this shop. So in not believing her, they just want her out of the store because her appearance is temporarily devaluing the store for them. It doesn't seem like there's any other women shopping in the store, but it's also probably the case that they wouldn't come in because they immediately see this woman who's dressed in a manner that does not conform to the image they're seeking. So they want her out of the shop. And it's not even fully personal, although I'm intrigued with this movie, having watched it yet again, watched it for many years, that it's interesting to me how much the women judge Vivian. And I'm not that surprised about the men, but most of the hostility in the early part of the movie, especially, come from other women. The harsh looks, the women in this shop, and I think part of it is, maybe I could be overreading, but I'm not sure. There's an anxiety for the working girl, like in this case, the street working girl, that where there's an insecurity because women are forced to perform, to get husbands, to get clients, to get jobs, to do so much, that the sight of a prostitute, especially one out of place, is really disturbing because it threatens to bring out the workings of the marketplace for all women all the time. The woman who has to put up with the rude comment because it came from the boss, or worse, the grabbing her as she goes by, or overtly ogling parts of her body, making comments about liking her skirt, sort of microaggressions that obviously most women would not want to tolerate being tackled the way Stuckey does later. But where do you draw the line as the woman? This is what's behind the Me Too movement, obviously, when when what's his name, Weisenstein, I forget the exact name, but Weinstein, when that came out, that he was basically a serial rapist who used career coercion and or lunging at women, getting them to his hotel room and all the rest of it. The meme Me Too just took off really fast. It was a brilliant meme, I think, because it opened up this idea of like, we don't, it's almost like the collective voice of women saying we don't talk about it too much. And maybe I didn't go through an experience as bad as the stuff Weinstein was doing, but it's like it's hardly a woman walking around who hasn't been treated like an object, however fleetingly, and has had to deal with that confusion of, because what's so disconcerting, and I'm not speaking as a woman, but I am speaking as someone who certainly talked to a lot of women, a lot of feminist scholars, and what can be so disconcerting for women is they are not experiencing themselves as on the market, and it doesn't matter. Like the market is always there. So you're walking along, a woman's walking along, thinking about an amusing encounter with her dog or someone else, and someone does a wolf whistle, or someone says, I like that skirt, and it just jars the woman because it's like, I wasn't, I'm not wearing this skirt for you. I don't even know who you are, and what I've been told is it's infuriatingly, it can make you feel infuriatingly helpless. Like how is it a complete strange guy can drive by and yell out something which completely jars my private thoughts? What gives them the right? And the answer is nothing, but it's fairly easily done. And the reason it tends to work is that the market is so pervasive, that women are commodified all the time, and they're placed in relative value to one another all the time. Whether you're thinking as a woman, whether you're thinking about it or not, the market is always thinking about you. If you read Cosmopolitan magazine, and maybe we'll look at a cover on Monday night, and Cosmopolitan still is a kind of manual for how to maximize your potential in the marketplace. And that's not a judgment. I'm not trying to be snarky. The magazine is very clear. It usually has about 10 headlines on it that say things like shorter skirts or not, 10 ways to know that he's thinking about you, 6 techniques that will have him not able to forget, on and on. But they're all manual tips on how to, basically on how to maximize your stock potential. And I'm not saying Cosmo should be banned or that there's anything quote unquote wrong with it. I'm just trying to show you that the discourse of Cosmo is always the same. And if you look at 20 Cosmo ads, just type in Cosmo covers, they all look the same. And the models change, but it doesn't matter. They're utterly substitutable. I mean, they're all attractive, but and maybe you'll recognize that a face. But in fact, it doesn't matter. The women just keep showing up in similar poses and surrounded by similar headlines. And Cosmo is incredibly repetitive. It seems to go over the same 10 articles every year for literally years. And then remember as well that the articles are just, in some ways, are just there to hold the advertisements in place, where the advertisements in a magazine like Cosmo go even farther, like this lipstick is infallible and this won't wash off, and there's often this kind of inside trading discourse in Cosmo of woman to woman, he's not going to know what I'm going to tell you, that there's a special ingredient in this lipstick so it won't smudge when you have dinner. I mean, it's no, who cares? It's not a big deal, but it's like tips, inside trading of we know how to puff up the value of the stock so that when you cash out, so to speak, when you say get engaged or spend a night or get married, or whenever you have a contractual transaction on the romance market, how high will your level of trading be? So let me just push a little further with this.
How much is this, Marie?
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
Look, I got money to spend in here.
I don't think we have anything for you. You're obviously in the wrong place.
So notice at this point, Vivian is capable of defending herself, but you can tell that she's starting to feel overwhelmed by the market. I have money to spend in here. That kind of puts her in a vulnerable position. And they say, I don't think we have anything for you. And they won't even tell her the price. There's got to be a price. Maybe it's $5,000, but they could say it. And they won't. They say it's very expensive. And part of what they're implying is you don't have a sufficient value. Your appearance does not indicate a sufficient value for you to trade in this marketplace. You are a cheap stock. You're obviously in the wrong place. We won't let you trade here. We won't let you trade up. Like the cologne ad, I saw a women's cologne ad that said "fake it till you make it," and it showed a woman a very attractive woman in a long white dress on a motor scooter outside the casino at Monte Carlo, and the implications obviously was this woman is obviously beautiful and sexy, but for the right now she has no backing, so she'll have to play it very carefully in hopes that her position in the market will be improved. And again, people talk about that all the time, taking a position in the market. And if you take the wrong position, you can really get hammered, and you have to start to make a decision of, do I sell these stocks at a loss and give up my position, or do I keep my position in the hopes that the stocks will go up, but then they sink even further? And so this is about positioning, and she is being refused. Her stock is being devalued with every exchange in this conversation.
Please leave.
So the way this is shot, the exiting of the door, and her head is bowed down, the entrance and exits, especially of women in romances, other genres too, but let's stick with romances. They are a great way to visually telegraph the emotional states of the woman, and also how they've been positioned on the kind of chessboard of relative value. And she's been humiliated, and she feels it. She's confused. It hasn't broken her spirit, but she can't hold her position in there. And I think it matters too that he gave her a lot of cash, so she has money. But later, when he says, I'm surprised you didn't buy more dresses, she says, well, they were mean to me. And he's like, what do you mean they were mean to you? And then before they go into the store, she says, you know, these people are not nice to people, they're nice to credit cards. And it seems to make a real difference that he takes her shopping with a credit card. It gets brought up all the, you know, I gotta go, but she's staying and she has my credit card and we will help her use it, sir. Credit cards, especially in 1991, maybe not so much now, they're pretty ordinary, but they were still rather powerful because they weren't money. I mean, they represent money, but they weren't paper money. You don't have to go in there with a wad of bills. So Edward didn't mean to do this, but in some ways he set her up for failure. And I guess he didn't know that people would accept the credit card from her, and that's probably quite true. But money is current cash is already a kind of devalued form of transaction because however much you have, it's limited. Now, obviously, credit cards have credit limits, but often they're fairly generous, say $5,000. So you can, you know, most purchases can be made, and sometimes to our detriment, obviously, because we can make a purchase for a bit more than our budget really supports, but the credit card will still allow it, and just add the interest. So just jumping ahead, and I'm going to, you know, bring this lecture to
Fellas, let's finish this up this afternoon.
close pretty
Jake,
soon.
set something up with Blair. 2 o'clock, 2:30 would be good. You were right about Morse. He mortgaged everything he owns right down to his underwear to secure a loan from the bank. It's not just any bank. Plymouth Trust, huh? Mm. So it goes without saying that your business means a lot more to them than our friend Mr. Morse. All you got to do is call the bank.
So this is Stuckey, who likes to kill. We find this out later. You know, I'm not totally sure what Stuckey's issue is, but so he's not at all interested in. Well, I think in a weird way he feels vulnerable all the time because he's a glorified paper shuffler. He does whatever Edward tells him. Edward susses out the deals. Edward sets them up. Edward says, "Who do we know on the appropriations committee?" Stuckey's incapable of putting a deal like this together. What he's capable of doing, and he has zero conscience, so he makes it easier, is dotting the I's, crossing the T's, getting things signed, and that's what he gets paid for. And Edward's under no illusions from the very beginning about Stuckey. At the very first party scene, somebody comes up to him and says, "Phil said," and he just cuts him off and said, "Phil's just my lawyer." You know, let's keep that clear. And so this hesitation on Edward's part is alarming to Stuckey. And then what Edward does here becomes a crucial element. Let me see if I can just play it for you.
Yeah. Edward, excuse me for saying this, but what the hell is wrong with you this week? Are you giving Morse a chance to get away?
You know what I used to love when I was a kid, Phil?
What?
Blocks. Building blocks, Rector sets.
So I like Monopoly, huh? Boardwalk, Park Place. Well, what's the point?
We don't build anything, Phil. We don't make anything.
We make money, Edward.
Okay, so that is the crucial breakpoint of the 90s, in fact, which will blow up in our faces in 2008. Money makes money. It doesn't make anything except itself. And Edward is saying, you know, I used to like to build with blocks. There's a whole motif, both visual and thematic, and it's very powerful in genre when the visual theme meets the narrative theme. So the whole issue of heights and buildings, like he's in the penthouse because it's the best, and when he says had to be the top floor, and she's in this rundown tenement, she goes, it's the best. So there's a kind of a joke there, but there's a lot of his fear of heights is the only indication we get that he's aware that as high as he has risen, there's nothing all that sustaining that were he to start to fall, he would not stop. He would, conceivably go to the bottom. And in many ways, although she seems to already be at the bottom, she's very comfortable being in high places. And they both have a lack of confidence, and they both have confidence in different areas, which is why they're a couple, why they could come together. His confidences shore her up, her confidences in the power of hugging and sharing and caring, which he's forgotten. He needs that. She needs his confidence about handling the world, because the world's kicked her around, and we see that in this store. She's developed a tough skin, but it's just a skin, and if people push back hard enough, then it breaks the skin. All right, I'm gonna see if I can go back to sort of stop sharing. How do I do that? Yeah, let's see. Okay, share camera. Okay. You're about to share your camera. Okay, I'm sharing my camera. I guess I'll find out. One thing I don't really understand, so maybe you guys can tell me, is if I look at this tape later, after it's been rendered or whatever they call it, and I don't see the screen sharing, I don't know if that means that, well, I don't know, what does that mean? Maybe you can't record screen sharing. I honestly don't know. This is all new to me, especially when it comes to teaching film. So I'm not sure how to incorporate. I have a plan, but my iPad wasn't working tonight, or my password wasn't working. I thought I knew what it was. And I can still go back to holding, although it'd be easier with an iPad than a laptop. Because I know that does get the scene onto the BB Collaborate. It's not very good quality, but at least it's there. So if these scenes aren't showing up, I hope at least the voiceover is. And so when I get home tonight, after this is rendered, I'll post it on YouTube. It'll be posted on BB Collaborate. And I was working on a document today that was, I think I've repeated some of the things I was writing about today, like that I was literally crafting for this lecture. It's a long document, and some of it may be slightly repetitive, and I don't know that that's necessarily bad, but I should explain that I haven't taught this class in 7 years, and before that I taught it every year for 10 at least. So when I went back to my files to teach this class again, it was a little overwhelming, because I had lectures that were overwritten by lectures and overwritten by even more lectures, and I had to get back in the saddle, so to speak, like to get, I know more than enough to do this class, but it'd been a long time since I'd executed it. So I keep patching together, and then I write totally new stuff, because I'm 7 years out, and there are many other things I've learned about capitalism and discourse through my teaching over the last 7 or 8 years since I last taught this class. So there's a little bit of a leapfrogging thing going on. I just wanted to let you know. I mean, I'll think about that when I am designing your midterm and so on. But I think the worst thing that happens, and this isn't that bad, is you'll occasionally might see a paragraph that's similar to a paragraph you saw in a lecture, and once in a while you may even see a half a paragraph it's the same. That's partly because I would lift out of earlier lectures and paste them into my new comments and basically come up with this pastiche and this montage, and it's very hard for me to remember or separate out what went where. So I'm really just, I decided, like, that there's quite a bit on The Graduate in what I'm going to post tonight, but it wasn't, I don't believe most of it was in the thing I posted on The Graduate. It's a little more specific. I think I wrote it later when we were doing scene analyses. So, kind of apologies for that. In some ways, I'm finally writing a whole book while I'm teaching this. I hit like 170 pages today. I'm not going to put all that on you guys, but I've probably written about 40 or 50 pages fresh since I started teaching the class this semester, and I think that's probably going to continue. And I'm going to do B77 in the fall, the Western, film noir and melodrama, and probably then I'll finish. The book will be done, and Harvard University Press has well, they've approved the abstract. They want to see it. But I kind of hadn't been writing it, I guess, because I hadn't been teaching it. So maybe you guys will help me if you can stand it. I'll finish the damn book. You know, when you're a full professor and you've jumped through all the hoops and you've got all the awards and you don't have the career pressure. I don't have to write this stuff. I don't have to publish this stuff to enjoy it and to share it with you. So and it doesn't matter in terms of my career. So sometimes the incentive to write yet more books at my stage of my career is not as compelling. But it's been interesting. It's been interesting to get back into this, and so why not? It's a labor of love, I suppose. So I'm going to let you go on that. And of course, I will credit you guys if I finish this thing at your expense. Then I'll acknowledge you, and you can have that to put on your bookshelf. So I'll sign off for now. I hope this worked. I at least hope my voiceover worked. But look, even if it didn't, we'll look for the documents. I'll see you Monday night at 7:30, hopefully in person. Oh yeah, I had a fun idea. It may be a fun idea. You know, lots of people put profile pictures when they go on Zoom, and I thought it might be fun if you guys picked a still from any of the first 3 films that you like, and let that be your profile picture when you come on Zoom on Monday, just for the hell of it, because it might be fun to say, oh, you know, I see that Jamie, I see that you put on the scene of Benjamin at the bottom of the pool in his scuba diving outfit. What's up with that? I don't know. Maybe it's a dumb idea, but if it's intriguing, do it. If not, not. And I swear the Zoom stuff would just, you have to make it up as you go along, which it's not like I've never done that before, but not at this level. So let's keep soldiering on.